Welcome! Today, we're taking a deep dive into something we probably see every day, but rarely give a second thought to: the wheel. It's one of those few inventions that has been with us practically since the dawn of civilization, shaping our world into what we see today. We will explore its entire journey, from its very beginning to the present day, in light of all the sources we have. What's most fascinating is that while we see it daily and immediately connect it to cars and transport, the wheel wasn't actually invented for that purpose at all. Its story is quite complex and unfolded gradually. So, if the wheel didn't exist, how did people move heavy goods from one place to another? Well, there were methods, but they weren't very efficient. Mostly animal power was used, like oxen or buffalo. They also used wooden sledges, which were dragged across the ground, a task that required immense force. Sometimes they would also use round wooden logs, placing the goods on top of these logs and then pushing them along, much like rolling logs. However, all these methods were obviously very slow and labor-intensive. So, how did the idea for the wheel come about? It's not something you can just find growing on a tree. That's the special thing about it. The concept of a wheel isn't natural. Unlike a fork or a bird's wing, you don't find examples of it in nature. A rotating wheel and axle system simply does not exist in the natural world, which is likely why it took so long to invent. Furthermore, to create a truly functional wheel, you need metal tools for precision and measurement to ensure it is perfectly round and spins correctly. Such tools were not common before the Bronze Age, so technology itself had to reach that point first. So, if not for transport, what was the first wheel made for? The first known wheel appeared around 3500 BC in Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq. It was the potter's wheel. This single invention revolutionized the craft, making the work much faster and the pots more uniform and of higher quality. But even more importantly, it gave practical form to a fundamental concept, the idea of rotary motion. This idea of a disc spinning around a central point was the crucial breakthrough that would later lay the foundation for the transport wheel.
So, the potter's wheel essentially paved the way. It proved that a rotating object could be useful, which helped overcome a significant mental barrier. The wheel for vehicles or transport appeared about 300 years later, with evidence dating back to around 3200 BC. That's still a long time, and one theory suggests that the idea might have evolved from the rolling logs used to move heavy sledges. The thinking is that as a sledge was repeatedly dragged over these logs, the axle-like part resting on them could have worn grooves into the wood. Eventually, someone might have had the insight to deepen these grooves, creating a basic wheel and axle system. While this is just a theory, it is a plausible and interesting one. As for the first vehicles, their wheels were not like ours today. A key characteristic of these early carts was that the wheels and the axle rotated together as a single solid unit. This means the wheel did not spin freely on the axle, the entire system turned as one piece. This, of course, presented a major challenge. How did they make turns? If both wheels are spinning at the same speed, one needs to rotate faster than the other when cornering.
Precisely. That was the biggest problem. While moving in a straight line was fine, as soon as you had to make a turn, one wheel would inevitably have to drag along the ground. This created immense friction, wasted a great deal of energy, and made turning extremely difficult. This was a major flaw, but the solution took centuries to develop. A significant breakthrough was the creation of the fixed axle. This meant that the axle itself was attached to the vehicle and remained stationary while the wheels rotated freely upon it, much like they do today. This change was revolutionary because it allowed each wheel to spin at a different speed while turning, according to its needs. It made a huge difference, dramatically reducing friction and making it much easier to steer. However, the wheels themselves were still heavy, solid slabs of wood.
The next step, therefore, was to reduce their weight. The credit for this goes to the Egyptians around 2000 BC. Their genius was to carve out the excess wood from the solid wheel, leaving only a few spokes to connect the central hub to the outer rim, creating the spoked wheel, much like what you see on a bicycle. This made the wheels significantly lighter, which in turn led to a major increase in speed. Obviously, a lighter wheel requires less energy to turn, allowing the vehicle to travel faster. This principle was especially critical for war chariots. The Egyptian chariots, for instance, were renowned for their speed. So after the fixed axle and then spokes were developed, a new problem emerged. The wooden wheels themselves were fragile. They would wear down quickly and could easily break. This issue was addressed by the Celts, an ancient European people who fitted a strong iron band, an iron rim, around the outer edge of the wooden wheel where it met the ground, much like you'd see on a traditional bullock cart. This dramatically increased the wheel's strength, preventing it from wearing out or breaking. You can see how each problem was solved gradually. First the issue of friction, then weight, and then strength. And between each of these improvements, there are often gaps of hundreds or even thousands of years. These were not overnight changes, and it's truly astonishing that such a fundamental object took so long to perfect. Yet even after all this, one thing was still missing: comfort. A journey on a wooden wheel with an iron rim, especially over a stony road, would have been terribly jarring and anything but comfortable. The idea of comfort came much, much later. You wouldn't believe it, but it took nearly 3,000 years just to make the wheel comfortable. The first concept for an air-filled or pneumatic tire came about in 1847 for a man named Robert William Thomson, who also patented it. But despite the patent in 1847, it wasn't immediately produced. That's the key point. He had the idea, but couldn't practically create it, likely because the technology or materials of the time were not advanced enough. So that idea remained only on paper. Decades passed, and then in 1888, another man, John Boyd Dunlop, came along. Yes, that's the same Dunlop of the famous tire company. He actually created the first practical working pneumatic tire for his son's tricycle. He was tired of the solid rubber tires on the tricycle, so he invented the air-filled version, and it was a success. That was the start of the Dunlop company. However, these tires were not yet fully suitable for cars. Then came the Michelin brothers, another famous name. In 1891, they patented a pneumatic tire for automobiles that could be easily detached from the wheel and replaced. That was a huge step forward. But you've raised a very important point. These air-filled tires also needed a special kind of rubber. Ordinary rubber probably wouldn't have been durable enough. This is where another crucial invention played a major role: vulcanization. This process was discovered in 1844 by Charles Goodyear. He found that if you heat rubber with sulfur, it loses its stickiness and becomes very strong, flexible, and resistant to the elements. So, yes, this process is what made rubber suitable for use in tires. In fact, without vulcanized rubber, the pneumatic tire might not have been possible, or at least not nearly as successful. Later on, in 1910, the B.F. Goodrich Company made the rubber even stronger and more durable by discovering the method of mixing it with carbon. So, you can understand that comfortable and strong tires became a reality in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was a sequence of breakthroughs. First, Thomson's idea, then Dunlop's practical invention, followed by Michelin's detachable tire, and all of it made possible by the better materials developed thanks to Goodyear and Goodrich. So, that's the story of the tire. But what about the wheel itself? What changes happened to it during this time? They surely didn't remain the same old wood and iron wheels, did they? No, those changed as well. In the early 20th century, wire-spoked wheels became common, especially on cars and bicycles, much like the ones seen in old movies. Yes, these wire wheels were even lighter than the previous wooden-spoked versions. In fact, the very first Benz patent motor wagon used wheels just like these. Later, as cars began to be mass-produced, there was a demand for cheaper yet stronger wheels. This led to the introduction of stamped steel wheels, which were created by pressing them into shape with machines. These stamped steel wheels were inexpensive, quite durable, and are still used on many cars today. As for the shiny, beautiful wheels often seen on sports cars, those are alloy wheels. They are created by mixing different metals, most commonly aluminum. Their main advantages are that they are lighter than steel wheels, which improves the car's performance, and they are better at dissipating heat, which is beneficial for the brakes. Their use was first pioneered by Bugatti on its Type 35 racing car way back in 1924. So yes, the concept is quite old, but alloy wheels only became popular on mainstream vehicles much later. And today, we have advanced even further than that with the arrival of carbon fiber wheels.
That's why they are mostly used in supercars and racing cars. Michelin started working on this back in 1971, and today, companies like Koenigsegg and Porsche are using them. So this magnificent journey has taken us from the Mesopotamian potter's wheel clay all the way to carbon fiber. Regarding its origins, evidence for the wheel has been found in other places besides Mesopotamia. For example, in the Indus Valley Civilization, clay toy carts with wheels have been discovered at sites like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, confirming that the wheel existed in the subcontinent, at least in the form of toys. Similarly, wheeled toys were also found in Mesoamerica, the region of ancient Mexico. But the interesting part is that they don't seem to have used it for transport. While the concept of the wheel was present there, no evidence has been found of it being used for large carts or for hauling goods. This might have been because they lacked large draft animals to pull the carts, or perhaps the terrain was unsuitable. It is strange to think they had the wheel but didn't use it for practical transport. Furthermore, there is some debate about where the absolute oldest wheel was discovered. There is evidence from Mesopotamia, a very old depiction on an artifact from Poland known as the Brunasich pot, and an actual wooden wheel found in the Ljubljana marshes of Slovenia.
All of these discoveries date to roughly the same period, between 3500 and 3100 BC, so it's difficult to say with certainty where it was first invented. However, it is clear that the invention emerged in the region of Mesopotamia and perhaps Eastern Europe at around the same time, and then spread from there. And what was its impact on human progress? The effect was profound. It changed everything. In agriculture, for instance, the bullock cart made it easy to transport crops to the market. The water wheel, known as a hrat, made large-scale irrigation possible. In construction, systems based on the wheel's principle, like pulleys and winches, simplified the task of lifting heavy objects. In warfare, chariots completely changed the landscape of battle, followed later by machines like the catapult. Ultimately, the Industrial Revolution would have been impossible without wheels and gears. Machines, factories, trains, wheels were absolutely everywhere. So it would not be an exaggeration to call the wheel the very engine of human progress. It is a foundation upon which the modern world stands. In summary, the story is about how a seemingly simple idea of a rotating disc could evolve to become so complex and such an essential part of our lives.
Its invention, you could say, put wheels on the very speed of civilization. And that journey is not over yet. What does the future hold? Perhaps we'll see motors integrated directly inside the wheels, known as hub motors. Or maybe tires that can never be punctured, airless tires. Their design is engineered to support a vehicle's weight and absorb shocks without needing to be filled with air. Materials like carbon fiber might also become commonplace. So, the wheel will likely remain with us in the future, just its form will continue to change. It certainly seems that way. While we may dream of flying cars, this centuries-old invention for traveling on the ground remains incredibly effective and essential, doesn't it? Absolutely. It makes you wonder, what seemingly small or insignificant thing or idea in our world today might go on to change the future in the same profound way the wheel did? An impact that, right now, we probably can't even imagine. Yes, that is a truly fascinating question.